Anthony Magnabosco hosts my favorite YouTube channel of all time. He is a self-described skeptic and atheist from San Antonio, Texas, who has dialogues with total strangers on camera using a method called Street Epistemology. In an era of unproductive conversations that often turn into heated arguments between different sides, Street Epistemology takes a different tact. This is an abbreviated explanation of Anthony's method, and I will give him a chance to correct or add to it, but allow me to try. Here's what Anthony does. Anthony goes out in public, often to universities. People will walk by, students, faculty, or just random people walking through campus, and Anthony will ask them if they want to have a conversation with him about a belief of theirs. If they agree, Anthony will ask them if it's okay if he tapes them. He always gets consent, explains what he's doing, and is kind and inquisitive in his conversation style. To start, Anthony asks this person about a belief they feel very strongly about. Maybe it's their God belief. Maybe it's that karma is real. Maybe it's that spirits are real. Maybe it's that vaccines cause autism. And Anthony will ask them a series of questions about this strongly held belief. But unlike TV debates, the ones we're all used to on shows like Crossfire, Anthony doesn't do any of that. He asks them to define key terms. He then asks them questions about how they came to that belief. He then tests their own beliefs with their own definitions. He asks questions you don't hear in those debate shows. At the end of these conversations, Anthony will give his conversation partner a puzzle piece to thank them for participating. He encourages them to come back for more conversations, which they quite regularly do. On the video he publishes, Anthony encourages his viewers to be civil to the person, as they will often watch these videos. As you can tell, he doesn't try to own or win these debates, but quite regularly, these people have epiphanies, lower their certainty about their belief, or outright change their mind. Anthony has been interviewed on countless podcasts. He is also a founder and the current executive director of the new nonprofit organization called Street Epistemology International. Anthony has given dozens of talks and workshops on street epistemology at conferences worldwide, and I'm so honored to have him with me today. Anthony, thank you so much for coming. And to start, did I get anything wrong or miss anything in my introduction?
It was almost 100% accurate. Like I'm trying to, there was one thing I was like, I would have tweaked one little word, but I don't remember what it was. But yeah. I guess that gives me a little flexibility in case there was something problematic in there. But no, like I was spot on. So it sounds like you've been watching the videos and you get what we're doing. We're not trying to do gotchas and make people look stupid, but illustrate that you can use questions to really help people take another look at their views where maybe they do change their minds.
Absolutely. And I think what's fascinating is if people are, if they want to change somebody's mind, just the way that we do things doesn't currently work. But I'm going to talk about that in a second. Let's zoom out first. I'm going to ask you a question that you've been asked probably the most of any question ever. Can you define what epistemology means? And can you kind of, expand on the method?
Sure. Epistemology is this branch of study that focuses on how we know things that we think that we know. And street epistemology started with that in mind. However, when you use it, you start realizing that it's not so much about what people think that they know. Mm-hmm. That's part of it, I guess. But it's also an assessment of a person's confidence that their claim is factually true. A little bit of a distinction there. I have a sense that I'm correct about something, and we gently interrogate the person's level of certainty that they're correct in their level of confidence that that's true. Mm-hmm. Now, I think you could actually use it to figure out that we know something or we don't know something. There's this weird relationship between the confidence that I have that something is true and the actual mm-hmm. truth of the matter. But when we're engaging with people, it's to help people reconsider the reasons and methods that they're using to be able to say, I'm really, really sure that this is true. Mm. So there's a slight little distinction there. There's an academic field of epistemology. Yeah. And then there's this weird phenomena called street epistemology that we've been really hammering on for the longest time. And it's experimental. It's being developed. Like street epistemology in 10 years may be very, very different than it is today. I'm optimistic that it'll be heading in a different, and continue on this positive direction that we're going. But I think that there's a lot of room for improvement too in what we're doing.
Now, this method isn't just some like random new internet thing happening. This has Socratic origins, does it not? Didn't Socrates roughly practice this method?
Socrates, from my understanding in the writings of Plato, talks about a gentleman that would go out and challenge the authorities of the day. What is virtue? What is punishment? These big questions of life. And he generally used a lot of questions to elicit these moments of wonder and reflection. And that's a lot about that's really a big part of what we do with street epistemology is we ask questions and we give people plenty of time. We don't want to misrepresent. We want to figure out the clearest representation of the person's view and then ask questions about it so that they can ponder on it and think and say, I don't know if I should be so sure that that's true. Or conversely, I really do have good reasons and reliable methods. So I think I'm justified in being 90% sure that this thing is true. Right. So I like to explain street epistemology as an offshoot of the Socratic method, where we're trying to leverage the research that's coming out of psychology and the sciences, trying to go where that takes us. The research that says, hey, if you hit people over the head with facts, you may close them down and possibly disincentivize them from exploring their view any further. They may even double down on their view in some cases. And these are the things that we're trying to avoid when we're using this approach. Right.
And let's stay on you for a second. So, I've listened to lots of interviews with you, and from what I understand, you were kind of the angry atheist who used to get into debates, and you started to just kind of realize it was ineffective. Could you kind of expand on that a little bit?
Right. So I was, I guess I started reading books and becoming more comfortable with my non-belief in any gods. I identified as an atheist. And then when I started looking at all the materials out there, online videos, it was atheists arguing and giving counter apologetics to the arguments that theists would make for thinking that their God was real. And I was using that approach, like I was learning it. I knew all the arguments.
Yeah.
And then I made the fatal mistake of trying to use it with family and friends. And that shut those conversations down. It made them defensive. They unfriended me on Facebook. And there are some people that I barely talk to today because of that approach.
Wow.
So when I discovered that there might be a different way of talking with folks about that topic, that was extremely appealing to me. And I tried to use it. And I was going out in public, like you mentioned, with my camera and uploading videos. And I was getting anecdotal feedback that what I was doing with this approach was seemingly more impactful and effective in helping a person really think about the reasons that they were saying why they thought that their God was real. And then you start to discover that you can use it for all different types of claims, not just the God claims. So that was also appealing to me. Like, oh, wow, this is versatile. I could use this with somebody who says that so-and-so is the best president, or vaccines cause autism. That was extremely appealing to me.
And that's something that's actually something I want to bookmark, as kind of, I kind of come from, an activist place. And one of the things that I'm very careful of is like not to tell people how to do things, right? It's like, especially when you're dealing with some of these very charged issues that cause a lot of pain. If I come along like, you're saying it wrong, that's not a fun thing to hear. And that's not my intention. And that's never been your intention. I've never heard you tell people like, oh, you should do it. Like you have to do it like this. But I think what you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, is, hey, if you want results and you want to actually plant some seeds in there, this is just more effective.
It seems that way. And we're kind of walking this really fine line of, and the line has never become more apparent that it's how fine it is. Until we started developing a course to teach people how to do street epistemology, there's this major effort underway to finally take the learnings that have been coming as a result of people going out and recording conversations and putting it down so we can teach people how to do this. So now we're at this threshold of we want to encourage experimentation and pushing the envelope. However, there are certain things that we've realized that you should probably do or not do if you want to be effective at this.
Right.
So I think we are kind of reaching the point where we may have to sort of put down some lines,
right?
But they're wavy and they're very fine, and it's okay to color outside of them. But there are some lines of street epistemology. There's some things that you probably should not do in street epistemology, and there are probably some things that you should always do.
Yeah.
But I'm not the arbiter of that.
Yeah.
like that's the weird thing about this is it's this free flowing kind of community thing where someone uploads a video, it catches the attention, we discuss it, and then maybe someone else will go out and attempt it because they liked it, or they said, I'm never doing that again because I think that that's problematic. It's this grassroots type of thing.
Can you just, just for the people listening, and I really encourage people, like when Anthony gives speeches, he's just like, you need to watch the channel. And that's not like a clickbaity, like subscribe to me. It's just like, you really do need to watch it to understand it, I would say. So I encourage everybody to do that. But could you just describe some of the epiphanies that you've kind of been a part of helping people come to?
Oh, like examples of breakthroughs?
Yeah, just breakthroughs. Correct. Yeah.
Well, a lot of people it's interesting. A lot of the people in my area bring up supernatural claims. They think karma is real or God is real, or they've seen ghosts. So probably 60% to 70% of the examples on my channel are that. And I've been trying to branch out and saying, hey, we can talk about anything.
Right.
So we do talk about political stuff and social justice and those types of things. So many of the breakthroughs that I would probably identify, the breakthroughs honestly are, yes, of course, like this interrogation technique, like polite interrogation technique, is really effective at helping people take another look at their views, reevaluate their confidence, lower their confidence, and change their mind. But it's not limited to really any claim. So it's like telling you, oh yeah, like lots of people that I talk to stop believing in God, or they lower their confidence that ghosts are real, or they've changed their mind on something like that. That is very common. It really happens quite a bit out in the field.
Let me give an example of just one thing, an example of this. So when most people have a debate about guns, and again, Anthony doesn't have debates, but when most people talk about guns, let's say somebody says, I believe in the Second Amendment, it usually just devolves into a shouting match. Oh my God, mass shootings. You had a guy on your channel once, and this was just, a random person that walked by saying, people should have guns because of the Second Amendment. And so instead of just engaging in this reactionary debate, like we've heard 1,000 times on cable news, you said, if the amendment, if something could be done completely constitutionally and legally to your satisfaction, to where that was amended, literally what an amendment is, would you be satisfied? And then he said no. And then it came to, and then you helped him realize, oh, it's not about the amendment. It's just about, he thinks that people should have guns. And then he had epiphany after that.
Right. And hopefully next time he finds himself in an argument or a discussion, and I think you're right, what we do isn't debating, but perhaps he has a sharper view of his own position, and maybe he won't surface that as the reason why he's against stronger rules against guns or something like that. So that was beneficial. So maybe there wasn't like a huge shift, but street epistemology is also a big on bringing clarity to people's views, not only to myself as the questioner, but to the interviewee themselves.
Right. And we can go on that a second. Like one of the things I just love about your channel is it pushes back again. It completely pushes back against this like cable news, YouTube owned moment. Oh, I dunked on this person. And let's say you dunk on a person and you're right. And everybody retweets it. That person is still going to like that belief might even get hardened. When you do this, that is not the effect. Can you kind of talk about the culture of like winning and how this is different?
Yeah. So a lot of people are confused when they see me on a campus with my cameras because they think I'm out there to do a gotcha video because it's so prevalent. And I have to do a little damage control to assure people like, no, this is going to be different, at least hopefully. Because if it's not what I'm about to tell you that it is, then I failed in some way. So I'll generally explain, I'm out here to ask questions. We figure out what you think is true. I'd like to ask you some challenging questions to figure out what your main reason is for that. And hopefully leave you with a pebble in your shoe to think about it. And maybe if you really like it, you can come back and we can pick it up some other time after you've had some time to process it. So it's a completely different animal. This is a collaborative exercise. I want to work with you to help reveal your current reasons and see if they're the best ones. And maybe there's some better ones out there. And if we can't find better reasons for the ones that we may have discovered together that are not good, maybe it's time for you to have the conversation with yourself to say, maybe I should lower my confidence in the truth of that claim.
Right.
So this is like hand holding and collaborative working together And then the second you detect that somebody's becoming overwhelmed or frustrated, and this goes for the practitioner themselves, that's usually the indication to shut it down and try to meet again, because we want level-headed processing. We don't want reactionary defensive processing going on. That's a very key distinction about street epistemology. And it's difficult to get there because of the culture of owning other people. That's a huge impediment to overcome. But I'm optimistic that the more examples that are out there of people doing this, that there will be a positive connotation to the SE, to the street epistemology idea, where people will be seeking it out. Like, I'm thinking about voting for this candidate. Could you respectfully question me using that technique? Mm-hmm. That's where I want to get to.
As you kind of look across the landscape of political talk shows and online arguments, or even like heated political conversations with relatives at Thanksgiving, what are some of the things that you think people kind of miss the mark in how they conduct these conversations?
Well, many people, I think, try to approach it from an entertainment perspective. I need to get as many eyeballs on this as possible, or it's not worth my time. So with that mindset, you're going to probably look for reactionary people who are getting upset and making a scene, saying the most wild things so that you can use that as your tagline on your video to get more people to click it. Like, that's an unfortunate reality where we're at today. And it's been kind of a challenge to get people to notice what we're doing in SE, because I think our conversations aren't as appealing to some people who are looking for that high of watching people argue with each other.
Talk to me about the importance, kind of going into your method again. You said this a second ago, but rather than having that gotcha moment, talk about the importance of walking away and just ending the conversation.
Yeah. Well, the idea when we're engaging with people using this approach is we want to help them feel safe so that they will open up and honestly reflect on their claim, their reasons, and their methods for verifying their reasons that contribute to their high degree of confidence. So in order to get there, it seems advantageous to be as open and forthcoming about what you're doing, obtaining consent. And I think you hinted at that at the start. Like, that's a big deal. Truly explaining, this is what I'd like to do, and these are my objectives. Are you okay with that? So getting some buy-in. But even despite your best efforts, usually we end up asking very challenging questions that sometimes people aren't prepared for.
Yeah.
And we don't want confused conversation partners. We want somebody who's really tracking and following and realizing, oh, I'm having a hard time explaining my position on here, or this guy isn't getting it. I'm trying to explain it to him. Like, I need to rephrase this in a different way.
Right.
We're striving for clarity and honesty and trust. Yeah. And that's kind of hard to gain with somebody on the street after a short amount of time. You can do it. You can see it in the videos.
Right.
A lot of people also use this approach with family and friends who know them, and you've already established that. But that's such a big part of it, is like, no, I'm not here to own you or destroy you. I want to reveal your biggest justifications, your best reasons for thinking that this is true. And I want to be able to repeat what I think your view is better than you're actually describing it to me. I want to steel man your view so that you can really get a sense of what it is I'm hearing you say. And then like, usually what happens is a person thinks, oh, this guy interviewing me wants me to convince him that I'm right.
Yeah.
And I try to look for words that might suggest that that's how they're viewing it, to correct them, to say, you don't need to convince me. I want to understand how you became convinced. And that usually flips it, where people start, oh, like they really are interested in how I think that this is true. It takes the pressure off of people, because now I don't have to worry about coming up with an argument that my opponent is going to find convincing. I just need to merely explain how I became convinced.
And that's really kind of SE in a nutshell. And for anybody listening, SE is just short for street epistemology. Rather than do what a lot of people do in politics, where they just have the same reactionary talking points, you really try to get at how they came to their belief, right? That's the whole shebang of like really trying to understand their methods. Are they reliable methods? And, I also, this is just psychology 101. I kind of come from a mental health background. I was like a counselor for kids for a long time. And when people have epiphanies, it's usually not another person like hitting them over the head with it. It's them alone at night mulling over these things. And that's kind of your experience, right? Like, do you sometimes have people come back to you later saying they were thinking about it and they discovered something?
Yeah, almost always when people come back, they almost always remember the conversation and the topic being discussed. Sometimes they have a friend in tow because they want that. They want to. Can you do that same thing that you did, but with my friend?
It's like a magic trick.
I'll be happy to do it. But yeah, when people come back, they usually have given their belief a little bit more thought. They sometimes have different reasons than they gave before. Like they'll abandon a reason that they led with, but now they have a different reason, which I find is interesting. Like, whatever happened to that other reason? Like, I guess we're not talking about that anymore. And you can even say, like, I noticed that when you came back, you're bringing this other reason and not that one. Is there some reason why we're not talking about that reason? So you can just have this sort of meta discussion about beliefs and how we're building them and changing them. But yeah, it's really important, I think, to encourage people to come back for more talks.
Yeah.
Because we want to see their progress over time. We don't want to shut somebody down and embarrass them.
Yeah.
Because they may come back with a whiz-bang reason for thinking something is true that I find convincing, that I might say, you know what, I think I'm going to increase my confidence in their claim because I think they have a really good reason here.
Right. And that's a beautiful thing about your method too. And I'd love to ask you about this is when you do SE, it's not just a gotcha to like convert. So I'm putting convert in air quotes, somebody else. Applying this, you can kind of sometimes realize some of your own beliefs that are kind of unfounded, correct?
Yeah, very much so. That happens. Like when I'm out there, like you mentioned the gun control one, I was really against open carry. Yeah. And now I'm more open to the idea of open carry because I've talked to several people who had very strong open carry positions. They were in favor of it.
Right.
And I would interrogate them respectfully using questions, and like they had really good answers. Yeah. So I ended up changing on that view. That's been kind of the cool thing about this is that it ends up changing you as a practitioner too. Like, you just start seeing like, okay, all these people, like I was up in the north, like an hour north of here, like out in the sticks here in Texas.
Yeah.
And a lot of Trump flags and, that type of stuff. And I was just thinking like, I don't really have any animosity towards these people anymore. I just think that many of us, all of us are walking around with beliefs that we haven't really processed or thought about to our own standard.
Right.
And that is this, like SE is an opportunity to walk through these beliefs that are core to our identity to say, like, why is it in there? Yeah. How did it get there? Why is it still in there? What would it look like if that was gone on my worldview? Right. Like this is a healthy exercise. Epistemic hygiene is very healthy and we should perform it whenever we possibly can.
Right. And, I come on here looking like the most stereotypical leftist ever with like long hair and talking like this. So I know that this may just seem partisan, but this is for everybody. I, as a progressive, I have a lot of issues with mainline Democrats. And so I have, kind of applied these methods. So it's not just simply a partisan gotcha exercise. Let me ask you this. This is just a hypothetical. And again, I kind of want to walk through just roughly like a typical SE session. Again, I recommend people go watch stuff, but I started this channel and it's called How to Talk to People. And it basically, and I will fully confess, like I do this well sometimes, and sometimes I'm terrible. So like, I'm like everybody, like I will flamethrow and I will be like, oh, that was ineffective. And then sometimes I'm really patient and we'll talk to people. So I originally started this podcast because my friend, he was raised in a fundamentalist household, and his parents, it's really kind of metastasized into some pretty gnarly beliefs, beyond the pale crazy stuff, right? A lot of, QAnon adjacent stuff. And a lot of people ask me like, oh my gosh, these conversations devolve all the time. How would you kind of start and proceed in that conversation?
One of the first things you should probably do is think about what your goals are before you even talk to them. What am I hoping to achieve? Because that sets your own expectations. Because you may say, Like, I want to find somebody who believes in this thing and change their mind. Okay, that's a goal. You could do that. You might have another goal. Like, I want to talk to somebody who I vehemently disagree with and not lose my cool. Can I have a 10-minute talk with somebody that I disagree with politically and truly strive to understand what they have to say and not even ask them any questions, perhaps? So that might be another goal. And somebody might say, like, oh, no, I want to do a hybrid. I want to respectfully challenge them, listen to what they have to say, maybe leave them with a pebble in their shoe, and maybe they'll change their mind. Maybe I'll discover that there's a really good reason for them thinking that that's true. So, and you can have, like, there's thousands of different goals that people could have. And I think they could even shift mid-conversation. Yeah. So that's probably the first thing. And then the second thing is you need to find somebody to talk to who makes a claim.
Yes.
So you can go to a rally, you can go to Twitter. I found that if you can make it like face-to-face over video, like we're doing, or over the telephone, I guess, like being able to see the person you're talking with is really huge when you're having these talks. Ideally, I think face-to-face in person is best. So you need to find somebody who makes a claim, clarify the claim. Like, exactly what is it when you say you think
the Democrats have pedophile sex dungeons or something?
There you go. Yeah, exactly. Right. So let's define our terms here. Right. Like, exactly what do you mean by sex dungeon? Right. I didn't think I'd be saying that word today. So clarify your terms. And then it's also helpful to get a sense of their level of certainty that it's true. And this actually comes up quite a lot in psychotherapy too, I've heard, but you can say, like, on a scale from 0 to 100, how sure are you that that's real and true? Now, sometimes people get really hung up on the word true. So you have to pay attention. Sometimes people think, well, I think it's true, therefore it is true. So you have to really pay attention. Sometimes people think subjectively, like, well, it's my opinion that it's the case, and therefore I'm going to say it's true. I'm talking about something that's objectively, factually true.
Right.
I want to explore something that you think is factually, objectively true, and your level of certainty. And then they give a number. It's just a starting point, and it's not required.
Yeah.
They may say, I'm 30% sure that that's actually true. That could be a far different conversation that somebody says, 100%. It actually happened. I've got this friend and he saw them go in the dungeon and all this stuff, right? Yeah. You don't know where they're going to land on it. Right. And then you start revealing the reasons. Well, what's propping this up? Can you give me the biggest reason that's contributing to your high level of confidence that this is true? And to be clear, I'm looking for a reason that, if we discover together, is not a good reason to your satisfaction, that it would lower your confidence. I want to pick something that adds to your confidence and can deduct from it. That's the thing I'm looking for. You can lay it. You don't have to trick people and like trick them into doing that. You can explain, this is what I'm looking for. Do you value truth? Do you want your beliefs to align with the truth of the matter? Most people do. Yeah. So you can explain what you're doing. And then once you've isolated that reason that floats or that impacts the person's certainty, then you can explore how they verified that reason. So they may say, my biggest reason is I stumbled across it on this blog 3 months ago. And then that led me to a YouTube video. And then I've been following this guy on Twitter ever since. And I'm convinced that it's true. Okay, awesome. Yeah. We can explore the quality of that reason. How could somebody use that exact same reason come to a different conclusion? Well, yeah, I guess so. Well, how can we actually tell who has the truth? And this is them talking it through. This is them walking through it. I'm trying to be a very clean mirror. Like, I want to hold it up to them so that they can see, like, this is what I believe. This is what I'm telling this guy, and see if they're fine with that. Yeah. And then we usually end it too. Like, we don't want to overwhelm somebody. And then the other side of this is somewhat controversial, and I'm learning this more and more, and I can give a really good example here in a second. But a lot of people say, like, you should be telling people what the truth is when you do this. And I'm of the position that this tool is really good for helping you assess your level of confidence and the quality of your reasons and the reliability of your methods, and then leave you alone to process it. And if you come back, I can be that sounding board to you, but I'm not there to replace your belief with something else. This is your belief structure. These are your reasons. This is for you to process. Yeah. And that's challenging for a lot of people. Sometimes we struggle. We see people walking away, maybe even lowering their confidence in their claim, that something that's probably true.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's tough to just let them go. Like, this is a controversial thing in SE at the moment.
And I want to be clear, I'm not picking on any political side. I think both there's distortions and there's a lot of silliness to go around, but, zooming in, and to also emphasize that, like, not all Republicans are QAnon believers. I definitely want to say that. I don't believe that. But to zoom in on that, because I am a big fan of yours, like a good SE approach to the QAnon thing, like a question Anthony would ask, he wouldn't say, well, that's actually false. There's an article from the Washington Post, because they would be like, that's fake news. That they would shut down. You would instead say something like, if it could be demonstrated to your satisfaction from sources you trust that this wasn't false, would you believe it? That's like a way better question, isn't it?
Absolutely. Or you could even be more general. You can say, well, have you ever considered what you would need to see to change your confidence or lower your certainty that this is true?
Yeah.
Damn, I never really thought about that before. Good. Like,
right.
Because if you don't know what will change your confidence, you might be staring right at it.
Right.
So it's important to be aware of these things that will change our certainty in our conclusions.
With the knowledge that this really can change minds. And again, it's hard because that shouldn't necessarily be the goal. If you go into it just thinking like, I have to change them today, that's probably not the best approach. But with the knowledge that this does lead to this outcome, a lot of people say they feel drained when they have these conversations because they're about such sensitive topics. And of course, it applies to a lot of people's lives, right? If you're talking about immigration, some of these beliefs, how do you kind of counsel people of like not to get triggered, for lack of a better word, when they're having these conversations about sensitive topics?
Are you talking about the practitioners themselves?
The practitioner, the one facilitating the conversation.
The facilitators. That's a good question, dude. I don't know if I've ever really given specific advice. Well, yeah, actually, I wrote a blog post like how to stay calm and focused when doing street epistemology. I've given some tips on that because it could be upsetting when you're looking at somebody who's sincerely expressing something that you're almost positive is wrong.
Right. And
on top of it, it might be a slight to you personally. Like they may say, well, there's no way that you can be moral without a God.
Right.
And it's like, but I'm certain that that's not true.
Right.
So staying in the mode and trying to be neutral, taking your ego out of it can be exhausting.
Right.
But it could be one of the best things that you can do when you're using this approach. So the practice is probably one of my biggest pieces of advice. We have a Discord server with regular practice sessions where you can surface any claim. I think they spend 20 minutes on it, where there's a questioner and there's a claimant. And then there are observers who then will give you some good feedback at the end of it. Like, I really like how you did this and that. So the practicing part of it has really helped. I've had hundreds and hundreds of talks. And now I think it's nearly impossible for me to get upset talking with somebody about any topic. Because I've made the distinction between the person and the belief that they hold.
Right.
Now we link those very closely together, but when we're doing SE, we want to try to disentangle those.
Yeah.
Like, I see you as this person who's holding this belief. Would you help me look at that belief together? Like, let's examine it together. Is that cool? Can we do that? And then at the end, take it back.
Right.
But you may look at it a little bit differently when you do so.
Yeah. And it's a hard conversation. And like I said, I don't claim to like have the authority on this, and you don't say this either, but like I have a recollection when I was in college. I remember being really weirded out by Campus Crusade for Christ folks, because they were really like, I had a lot of friends because it was like this organization that a lot of people were in. And I had some people that like I would hang out with and drink, and they were in this organization. And I remember this one girl, like there was a crazy guy that came on campus that said Jews are from the synagogue of Satan. And I was like, oh my gosh, can you believe that? And then I asked her, and she literally is like, well, I agree with them. And I was mind blown, but I also recall having this like really stoic Jewish friend who didn't get triggered. And some might say you shouldn't tolerate that and just not talk to him. But he was like super like, okay, let's talk about it. And through just his super impartial questioning, she totally changed in 4 years. By the end of college, she wasn't like that.
Incredible. And it's hard to say if it was that one conversation that did it, but generally, like I get feedback from people that I've had conversations with who email me later to say that got me started on this journey. And I wasn't really happy with it at first, but like I value the truth, and I started asking the difficult questions, and I started lowering my confidence accordingly.
Yeah.
And there's sort of not that I'm going to this campus anymore, but there are a lot of religious groups on there, and we've had some skirmishes, nothing serious, but like, I don't want you talking to my group anymore because you asked they're not ready for these types of questions, Anthony, or people from the group coming up and saying, I've been told not to talk to you, but I do want to. Can you walk me? Can you ask me some questions? Wow. I want to believe true things. Like, it's stunning. A movie can be made at this in these venues. I think it's fascinating what's happening out there.
And something, as far as like, diagramming the process, the first thing he does is it's building rapport. So like, that's the first thing. So Anthony doesn't go right into a belief. He'll ask them how he's doing. And by the way, this is just psychology 101 coming from my background. I worked with kids with autism for a long time. And I remember being blown away because I was like private. It was like through a private organization, and they were being billed for a lot, the parents, but they're like, the first 2 weeks, I don't want you to do any exercises. I just want you to hang out with the kid and make them like you. And rapport building, can you talk about like why that part is so important in these conversations?
Yeah. And actually, I'm a little embarrassed that I left it out earlier when I was giving the steps, because
it's all right.
It's it's kind of wrapped it up with like building trust and openness. And that's the end result of building rapport. But you shouldn't do building rapport because it will lead to an open conversation partner. Like, it's just sort of socially the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. Where are you from? What keeps you busy? Do you have time for a conversation? Yeah. Did you watch the show last night? Right. You ever come to the trail with your kids? Whatever. Like, you can spend a little time just getting to know the person. Right. And you usually in the process, they get to know you. But there's value in that because you now have other things to talk about when you get further along in the conversation. Right. Like, they may say, like, I love this trail because I can run it in I can run 3 miles in, like, I don't know, what's a reasonable number, 40 minutes. Right. And that could be useful later on. If we get wrapped up in subjective truth or objective truth, we can talk about the distance on the trail. Like, it might take this other person 4 hours to do the same distance, but would you agree that the distance is the same for both? Right. Well, yeah, I guess so. So sometimes useful things can be leveraged later from the building rapport phase, but you want to be genuine. Like, don't ask a question that you don't want the answer to. Yeah. Like, just be as authentic and natural as possible. Right. And then you'll more than likely get that in return. And once that baggage is out of the way of like defensiveness, and I need to, like, once they realize that you're not trying to catch them in something, but you're trying to help, that's where the buy-in occurs. And that's where you can make real progress with the questioning approach. But some people need a lot more work. Like, there are some people where you might need 3 weeks of one-on-one because they're so guarded against what we're doing. Right. That you have to build that trust, and it can take a long time. Just as a personal example to share, again, kind of coming from the political world. So I worked on this campaign for a progressive candidate, and there was this, so I had to monitor social media. I was the communications director, and there was this troll, this like super Trump troll that you would always see. And this guy, just for reference, hates elected Republicans now because they're not hardcore enough. So he's like he doesn't even like them. And his Twitter account is hilarious. I mean, like, literally Newsmax, all that stuff, like, all the time. But I've just been so nice to him, and I'll tell him if I have a disagreement, but just in the way, like, I don't come at him super mean. So the first time he kind of snapped at me, and I'm like, oh, sorry. I didn't mean it like that. Here's what my intention was of saying. Is that clear? Long story short, this guy now loves me on the internet. So if I would have gone into this conversation, like, I want to change his mind and make him believe in this stuff, that'd be heavy lifting. But just through like a little rapport building, he now all the time is like, I want you to run for office and I'll vote for you. It's like, you don't agree with any of my beliefs, but it was all just because of how nice I was to him. Well, people like being treated like a human, because sometimes I think we get so wrapped up in the belief that they hold that we stop at the belief that they hold, and we're like, that's a horrible belief, therefore it's a horrible person. Right. It's not the case. Like, we're all generally pretty good people who are often running around with very shitty beliefs.
Right.
So acknowledging that this is a person who holds a belief like you were doing, and you were being personal and respectful, and you apologized when it was due, but you can overdo it too. You can be condescending in your niceness and like, oh, they're just manipulating me with niceties. Like, don't do that. Like, you could say, I have a real problem with this belief that you hold. However, I'm trying to make a distinction between the person and the belief.
Yeah.
Would you be okay if we explored your belief together? But you have to build trust and get there with a lot of people. It's not easy.
And it kind of reminds me, I remember I had a teacher in high school who said, being a good teacher isn't about knowing everything. It's about asking the right questions. And sometimes when we go into like debates with the other side, we think we have to know everything, but it's really not about that. Isn't it just about knowing how to ask questions?
That's a really big distinction between debate and arguing and what we do with street epistemology. We don't need to know anything about the topic. Like, it's helpful if you speak the same language and you can pick up on social cues, like somebody is comfortable or uncomfortable. But like, if you have a view on universal basic income, let's talk about that. Like, the less I know about it, the better questions I might actually ask about it. Because I may think like somebody who knows about it may think that's a real basic question and not ask it of you, but that may have been the exact question that you both needed to figure out that you're talking past each other.
Right.
So sometimes like a novice coming in and using this approach can help an expert sharpen their arguments or back off of their certainty in the claim. So it takes the pressure off of the person. All you need to know is like, hey, I'm going to try to be gentle and polite and listen intently and try to formulate the best questions I can possibly do. And it takes the pressure off. Like, the only pressure really is taking your ego out of it and coming up with good questions, which happens over time with practice.
Can you kind of talk about, I'll ask you to define two things, what steel manning is?
Yeah, it's the opposite of straw manning. So you may hear of situations, you may have even been accused of straw manning, where you look for the weakest argument, or you construct an argument for your opponent that is not their argument, so that you can just topple it with a question or a factoid that you have.
Right.
That doesn't help anybody, because the person who has the claim and is not making that argument looks at the toppled over argument and says, well, that wasn't even my argument. And now my belief survived your interrogation, and now I'm more certain in my view. Now, steel manning is me working with you to reveal your best argument. And I might hear your argument and say, have you thought about phrasing it this way? Would it be stronger if it was this instead of that? And you may say, well, yeah, but if we did that, then it would change it. Or you may say, no, that's a good idea. Like, yeah, that's a more fair characterization of my view than even I told you at the start. You want to talk about building trust and understanding. That's one of the best things that you can do.
And even when this is just like marriage counseling 101, let me repeat back what I heard you say to make sure I'm getting that right.
Huge question.
Yeah.
You could ask that question too much. you could like people, you can be too pedantic, I suppose, but pedantry is useful. Like, it could be useful to say, like, now that's a word I have a vague understanding of, or you can say that's a word I hear a lot, but a lot of people have different definitions of it. What is your definition of it? Because I want to work within your framework. This is your belief we're talking about after all. These are your reasons. So why would I want to mischaracterize it? So defining the words up front and getting the best, clearest view of their belief tower is one of the most effective things that you can do to helping a person determine maybe that they're over justified in their confidence that it's true or under.
Yeah.
And they may look at it and say, yeah, I think I'm right in the right spot. Thanks. This was still useful.
Can you talk about the backfire effect?
Yeah, this is a controversial thing that, in fact, we're writing a course, and I just finished writing the part on the backfire effect a little bit. Well, so it's this phenomena that scientists think that when you give somebody facts that shows that they're wrong, particularly on a moral issue that's tied to their identity. So if I'm really, really rigid and against guns, like I want them banned. If I were to see a study showing that it was actually a smart idea to allow people to have guns, maybe with some training or something, the discovery of that fact that contradicts my view could, number one, cause me to ignore the fact completely, and And then secondarily, did I say two?
Yeah,
Number
no.
one,
Yeah.
I'm number one, like cause them to ignore the fact completely. But number two, might even cause them to double down on their view, where now they're emboldened by the fact that you gave them. That's the backfire effect. But the latest research, the research on this is mixed. So the thing that we thought SE was a counter to may not be as big of an issue. But I have to tell you, like, it seems like it's a thing. It seems that people are indeed reacting, and maybe doubling down is the incorrect characterization of the backfire effect. Like, I think we're talking about reactiveness.
Yes.
We're trying to minimize negative reactions to the interactions that we're having.
Yeah.
And the presentation of facts showing that you're wrong could just be like, maybe you won't double down on it, but maybe you'll be less reluctant to meet with me again because I'm the guy that gives you these uncomfortable truths.
Right.
And that's not helpful for encouraging you to think about your views.
Right.
So there's some really good discussions about the backfire effect on David McRaney's podcast called You Are Not So Smart. He has a 4-part series of this group. Actually, I'm confusing things now. That's deep canvassing. But he has 3 videos, I think, or 3 shows on the backfire effect, where it was this really, really big thing. And then we looked at research, and now we're sort of here in the middle. Like the pendulum's been swinging.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know, like, I just, kind of being a political junkie, I see the discourse and it seems so predictable. And you see people, much in the same way I noticed in a lot of your conversations with like religious people, they kind of launch into their talking points, like things they've said millions of times. And I think your questions get them out of that. They get them out of that place. And by the way, I have my talking points too. Like I revert to certain things that are untested, right? Like I remember when I was, this is so embarrassing, but I was like, protesting the Dakota Access Pipeline. And I was like, I don't actually know how we get oil from the ground. It was just this little thing where I was now I came away from that actually, like, still, I kind of believed what I was protesting, but I didn't have a firm understanding of what I was even protesting to begin with. But I guess just my question is, how do you get people from just not launching into their little talking points? Like, how do you kind of break them out of that?
I mean, the talking points are usually coming up when you focus on the claim itself that they think is true. So like that's a good example, like protected land or pulling oil out of the ground. Like a lot of people, they're able to almost usually speak to the what they think is true. But then it gets more vague as you get into the reasons and the methodology. Like very few people have thought about how they're confirming their reasons. And I think we tend to get really locked up at exploring the claim itself. And like, how can you live with yourself thinking that that's true? We really get wrapped up in what they think is true when we should be spending more time in the reasons and methods. Now, talking points can go down to the reason level. Like, this is the reason why I think that it's true. But you can probably ask a couple of questions about their reasons.
Yeah.
And it should become evident pretty quickly that maybe they haven't given as much thought, or they were thinking about it differently than what it really is. There's this phenomena called the unread library effect. I don't know if you've heard of it or not.
No.
It's this idea that most people think that they can explain how simple things work until they're asked to do so. And that could be a really humbling process to be like, oh, maybe I need to like research this a little bit more. And that usually gets people off of their talking points. But if you just notice that they're just giving talking point after talking point after talking point, you can just say, like, you're giving me lots of reasons why you think that this is true. Which is the one that contributes to your confidence most? Can we just stay focused on that one? Because I want to see if it affects your confidence over here.
Right. Yeah. And that's actually something I was going to mention this earlier, but that's, I think, something you do really well is almost you have to wrangle, because a lot of people just spurt out a lot of stuff at once. And it's like, okay, let's just stay on one claim. Yeah. You said a lot of stuff, but like, let's just stay with one thing for now. And is that okay? Okay. Can we explore that together? And then,
it's funny you say that, because I have a text. I don't usually do SEO over text, but in this case I am. And we had this, I've been putting it on my Twitter, by the way. So if you want to see, it's about God and why this person thinks God is real. And we're making tremendous progress with the quality of her reasons why she thinks God is real. And just this morning, she said, do you mind? She's like, I'm ready to move on to another reason. And okay, we can do that, but let's talk about why you want to.
Uh-huh.
Did we reach a breaking point with that reason? Are you confused about what we talked about with that reason? Like, I would humbly like an acknowledgement that maybe you're starting to realize that that's no longer a good reason. Don't let me put words in your mouth if that's not the case.
Yeah.
But if it is, I want to have a discussion about it, because it could be useful later on if we discover that you have other reasons along those same lines that fall into that same kind of category. So just having meta discussions about what you're observing in the conversation could in and of itself be useful for making progress in assessing the confidence that their claim is factually true.
Oh my gosh. And I just have to emphasize again, when you have conversations, it's collaborative, like it's inviting, and this is the advice I'd give to people. Let's say you have, a parent that's like kind of going down some wormholes. Make it like a fun discussion to explore their beliefs with you, and rather than like trying to win, like making, because it can be fun. And that's something I wanted to ask. Like, I don't know if this is a convincing metric, but sometimes when I've had political debates, I'm drained after it. But after like a successful SE session, I feel freaking energized.
Yes.
Do you think that's a metric? Yeah. Talk to that.
Oh, is that a metric in events? Well, it's funny you say that too, because you're really hitting all the things that are on our minds these days in SE. Like, we started a nonprofit that you mentioned to find people to study what we're doing. And we found a neuroscientist that wants to study what we're doing. Now, it's not going to be MRI level stuff yet, but it will get the ball rolling on other studies. I have a high degree of confidence that that's the case. And one of the metrics that we're looking at is not only the impact of the questions on the person that we're speaking with, but the facilitator themselves. How do they feel at the end of the talk? Are they energized, or are they embarrassed? Do they feel that they were sneaky, or do they feel that they were helpful? I think that's a big part of dialogue, is how you feel afterwards. Yeah. And it might explain why we're so reluctant these days to even talk about politics, because when we do, we feel like crap afterwards.
Right.
But when you use SE, you don't have to do that. You could be like, I enjoyed that immensely. I've never had somebody question my political views in that way. Right. Where can I learn how to do that so that I can do it next time I have a discussion? That's the ultimate compliment too, by the way.
And, activists talk about burnout all the time, that like they'll go really hard and they're doing beautiful stuff and they're trying, but like they just burn out, and it doesn't seem as sustainable because, and you know what, there's just going to be stuff that like I can't quantify in this conversation they have to contend with. But I've had the experience where my girlfriend gets mad at me because we'll go to bars and I'll see like people I know have different political beliefs, and I'm like, yes. And I have a great time talking to them. And often they'll have some like little seeds in there, and I feel great at the end of it. And it isn't, I have to think that has to be some indication that this is maybe an avenue to explore.
Yeah. I think it sets this approach apart from other approaches.
Yeah.
Because many people feel like crap afterwards if they're debating and arguing, and like what a jerk that person was. But when somebody is energized at the end of it, like that's a really good thing. We need more of that. And sometimes people get like, I've noticed this too. People will watch an SE exchange that's going just swimmingly.
Yeah.
And they still have issues with it. Like, I don't know why, but like maybe they see it as manipulation, or you should have revealed your position. That's why it went so good, is because you didn't fully disclose what you're doing. Well, okay.
Yeah.
So let's over explain what we're doing. This has been an iterative approach, but yeah, for the most part, it could be really profound in helping somebody take another look at their views. And then if there were other people listening in on your conversation, like maybe that was a wake-up call to them too. Like, maybe I can talk about politics without it getting heated and ending on a handshake at the end of it.
Yeah.
Where I can hear my opponent, and they're not opponents in our world, but they're conversation partners, where maybe I can hear my conversation partner say, I don't know. You've given me something to think about. I'm gonna have to really ponder this, or talk to somebody else to get that reason sussed out.
Yeah. And I just think again about mental health. Like, again, a thing I kind of hear people already asking is, oh my gosh, how do you deal with when people have such crappy, hateful beliefs? how do you keep your cool? And yeah, how would you answer that? If people are like, why are you even entertaining that horrible belief? Why not just shut it out? How would you respond to that?
See, okay. That's so fascinating to me that there's a contingent of our population that wants to interfere with respectful dialogue just because the person is, what's the argument? Like, usually it's you're elevating their argument. You're promoting their argument simply by discussing it. That's usually the argument that I hear.
Something like that. Right.
And I'm of the position that watching somebody attempt to explain why they think something is true that I disagree with.
Right.
And noticing that they're having difficulties doing so, not to embarrass them, but like they're struggling here. They're missing some information. Like, this is probably good for my position to see them do that. So the more opportunities that we can see those that we disagree with give good reasons or bad reasons for their views, that's beneficial, because then that opponent of ours, our conversation partner, can go find better reasons or lower their confidence. Or if they give a good reason, I could entertain it. So we need to, like, I can't think of many topics that I wouldn't want to see discussed on a stage with a moderator and somebody doing this type of Socratic approach like we do with SE.
I think the answer is just that it works. Like, I'm just, I don't know if you're familiar with Gene Sharp at all, but Gene Sharp, he was a political scientist, but he studied nonviolent movements. Okay. So he studied and scrutinized all of them. And he came to the understanding that nonviolent revolutions are simply more successful. And he hated when people called him a pacifist. He hated it. He's like, no, this is not passive, because pacifism has all these connotations of being weak. And he's like, I reject that hippy dippy stuff. I'm not a pacifist. I'm simply doing this because it works. We're not trying to moralize and telling people, oh, you should, you can't feel angry. It's just simply that if this stuff works, shouldn't we give it a shot?
I love that view too. And I think people do conflate pacifism or gentleness with politeness. Yeah, they're confusing pacifism with politeness. Because I can be polite and still disagree with you and ask you really challenging questions that could result in you changing your mind completely.
Right.
There's nothing pacifist about that.
Right.
Like, that's about as hardcore, it's a different form of aggression, maybe, I guess.
Right. Right.
Maybe I'm not phrasing this right. Like, I don't think it's aggressive, but impactful maybe is the word that I'm looking for.
Right.
Like, it could be powerfully impactful to somebody if you use a gentle approach to help them discover on their own, to their own satisfaction, that they can't back up their own level of confidence.
Right.
That is earth shaking. So like this is a huge deal that is gaining it's gained traction in the atheist community and the skeptic community. And as you know, we want to move it out into other realms, and politics is like the big one to go to. But like, if you are a member of a tribe, and we all are, I urge you to take the time to learn this method. Like, you're not going to learn much about it now, but if you find the resources that are out there and watch videos and all the communities that are out there, we want you to learn it and bring it to your tribe and teach your friends, teach your colleagues how to do this. Right. Because it will give you a leg up in defending your own position and challenging your conversation partners.
And it can save relationships. I mean, God, so many people are fractured right now from relatives or friends.
Dude, have you seen the latest video that I uploaded?
No.
It was recorded 2 years ago. I've been in discussions with him on and off for the last 2 years. Like, I'd love to do something with this discussion that we had. It's a man who's going to school after 20 years. He's finally retired, worked for a long time. He's going to school now. And his wife is teaching the kids young earth creationism, that the earth is 6,000 years old. And he's just beside himself.
Wow.
He's been learning street epistemology and applying it with his wife. And like, you want to talk about a dire situation and helping loved ones like that. And that's a real tenuous one too. Like, the comments are just blowing up. Like, should he be doing this? What should he be disclosing to her? Does she know that he's talking about this with you? And now I actually have a second conversation with him that I'm hoping that we can one day release, where he's a little further along. She's noticed that he's doing something different, and she's dubbed it manipulation. So now this second conversation is us talking about what led her to think that it's the case. like, what are you doing? What are you doing that she might be dubbing it manipulation? Or is she changing her views and she's recognizing that? And now she's reflecting on it and saying, well, I was manipulated or something. It's a fascinating thing that has huge potential. And we're at the very, very beginning stages of this too.
And I think for all, my friend that I'm kind of, that inspired this and so many others, like, I mean, it's a classic thing, like, oh, Thanksgiving. Oh my God. And it could actually be a fun, inquisitive experience where you're fine and you actually kind of get in there a little bit.
I think we may even have the solution to that potentially awkward situation where you're gathered around with family members or groups of people. Somebody like, there's a guy named Ben Diesel who started the survey, and then another guy named Nathan Ferguson who took it and worked with the community to build it up really, really this powerful interactive survey, 25 questions, where you can be online. Everyone can be on their tablets, their phones, their computers, and going through this survey where it says like, do you strongly agree to strongly disagree that humans create words and define their meanings? Or do you think truth is objective or subjective? Things like that. These broader questions that influence how we build our beliefs and then how we defend them when we're challenged about them. So you can use this tool in those situations to figure out how people are thinking about their views, and you're not even surfacing sensitive claims. So this might be even more profound than what we've been doing with these one-on-one individual discussions. And that type of approach of broadly looking at these questions, like a survey of sorts, could suss out claims that people are bringing up to explain their reasoning that you can then interrogate later respectfully by using questions. So this is gaining it's catching on. People are coming from different areas and they're bringing these new tools, and what works stays and what doesn't work or is problematic usually tends to fall the wayside. And we've been iteratively developing this thing over the last 8 years since Peter Boghossian talked about it and released it to the wild. And we've been running with it ever since.
On the topic of iPads, can street epistemology be done online? And what are some of the limitations of this medium?
You can do it online. It's tougher, especially if there's other people observing. And this goes for whether or not it's in person or online. Right. So if it's on a Facebook page where there's other people observing and chiming in, it's going to be extremely difficult. Right. Unless they know that you're trying to do something different. Yeah. And you ask them and they butt out and they stay out of the way. But even still, knowing that you're being observed by your peers could result in more closed-mindedness and guardedness. So one-on-ones, try to record it if you can, just for learning purposes, like get their permission. Yeah. But a one-on-one in a quiet location where somebody's honestly contemplating what it is you're asking them. That's your biggest bang for the buck. You can ask the questions you can ask. What makes the questions powerful is the rapport that you built and you maintain, the trust and openness that you have, and then the questions land. But there's a lot of work you have to do to get to that point. Yeah, and even something else that we kind of referenced earlier, but on Facebook or Twitter, it can be performative for the questioner. So it's like, yeah, I know. I struggle with that too. Is like, who am I really hoping to reach here? Am I hoping to entertain my subscribers, my followers, right? Or am I really trying to get through this person? And my answer to that, honestly, is the people that are watching me. Yeah, because I want to teach. Like, yeah, yes, I want to. My interactions, I think, are different than. Yeah, of course. Because, right, you understand, I'm trying to educate. Different medium. Yep. Yeah, a thing I do, like all of us, I have some friends from high school that post some very interesting things. But rather than like pile on in their comments, like I'll send them a private message. Good. And then they understand, like even that action of like not dunking on them publicly, they're just going to appreciate and maybe loosen up the fact that you did it like that. I've done that too. And I've even had somebody say, oh, you must be referring to that post that I made. Yeah, I was drunk when I posted it. Or, maybe it wasn't the nicest thing sometimes you notice just by inviting somebody to talk about it, there's a little bit of adjustment right then and there. Even just maybe a little bit like, maybe I'm not so sure that that's true. Just by inviting someone to a discussion. But that's cool that you do that. I wish more people would do that. You even I was listening to a talk of yours today, kind of going back earlier to the importance of rapport, where someone I think was expanding on a karma belief, and just in like
you asking what they believe, they're like, oh, wait, I don't believe that at all. Right.
Yeah, that happened. I was talking to a guy a couple of years ago on a campus. Right. Exactly. I think he said he was absolutely sure karma was real, in the act of him defining it. Like it's this thing where the universe is listening to what we're doing, and then it rewards you after you do something good. And I don't believe it anymore. Like, that was kind of a nice little, like, it's like, whoa, what's happening here? Now, if people do that with really core beliefs that are important to their identity and they're flipping that quickly, then there's probably something amiss.
Right.
But this one, I don't think he really had a lot of skin in the game. So he was able to objectively look at it, which speaks to the importance of distancing people with their consent from the belief so that they can objectively look at it. Right? We fall in love with our beliefs to the point where we want to cherish them and protect them to our own harm. Like, right? We can grab onto that person and drown with them. Like, we can do the same thing with beliefs. We have to let go of our belief. We have to be more willing to let go of our beliefs.
And this is one that I think I've struggled with, but I really think about it a lot. So I got really into researching the cult of Scientology, and there was an old YouTuber, named Mark Bunker, and he was just the sweetest man. And he would basically just go. It wasn't SE exactly, but he was super kind to Scientologists, but he would question their beliefs and he never reacted. And I can't tell you how many Scientologists like now go to him and they've told him he helped them out of it. But a maxim that I've adopted is like, I don't hate Scientologists. I hate Scientology. I hate these beliefs. I don't hate like the people that are kind of consumed with them.
Yeah. So I think like, I wouldn't go so far as to say I hate beliefs, and that's fine if you do. I say I don't respect beliefs. I respect people. People just hold beliefs, and I could hold a belief today and not hold it tomorrow, and I'm still a person that you would hopefully respect, even though I may have discarded. Like, hopefully you won't penalize me because I used to think something that you hated.
Right.
Like, I hope you'll be like, oh, I admire that you came around on that view and that you were willing to like seriously entertain it and let it go.
Right.
Maybe you could ask me questions to challenge me on something that you think that I'm mistaken on.
Right. We will close up soon because you've been very generous with your time. But here's just a question I'm been thinking about. So I'm reading this amazing book called Fantasyland by Kurt Anderson, and he basically talks about the unique legacy of America and how we've had so much conspiracy thinking from the beginning of our time, starting with these people that came over from Europe and were told that there were streets lined with gold, and there was all these distortions. And then you read about the medical quackery of the 1800s, or the truly crazy religious stuff. Do you think we are living in a moment that is more delusional now, or has this always been where we are?
I don't know. I really don't know. My sense is that it's about the same. I think it's the same. It's just more obvious now because we're all talking to each other and we're posting everything online. So it's more visible. So it was probably always there, but we didn't realize it. Actually, maybe it is worse now because now with the internet, like these groups, these individuals are now talking to each other and collaborating and putting videos together and, making these sincere, like really well produced videos that the earth is flat or something. And then people get caught up into that. So maybe it is a little bit worse. I'm not exactly sure. Like I'm a little discouraged that our government doesn't seem to be doing more about it. Like, where is the sincere effort to teach people how to critically think? It's just sort of like left up to teachers to maybe hopefully discover it and encourage their students to ask questions.
Right.
And then you get your activists who, of course, are pushing for it. But like, maybe there's some that's one of the reasons we found the nonprofit is to get research or money for research and to promote what we're doing. But it's discouraging that people don't see it. Like,
so what would that look like?
One of the biggest threats to mankind, I think, if we don't take this seriously.
1,000% agree. I mean, so what does that look like though? I mean, if you had a magic wand, does that look like an epistemological curricula? What does that look like?
Yes, I think it would mean a a curricula on street epistemology or something along the, I don't necessarily even care what it's called as long as it has those components and teaches people how to do it. I'd love to see it at the university level down to middle school, maybe even grade school. I'd love to see parents adopting it and using it with their kids when the kid is afraid of the monster under the bed. It's a perfect opportunity to use this questioning technique.
That's so genius.
Why would you want to just say there's no monster in there, get in your bed? Have a dialogue with them. But I want to see that filter up all the way through government and in the military and worldwide. And I'm going to make another bold claim. I think we're getting, like, it's going to head there. It will eventually head there because there's something to this and it works. Like, there's something effective about this approach. And because we have that going for us, it's just a matter of time before somebody with some deep pockets recognizes what we're doing and backs it so we can study it and develop these materials.
On that question, and this will be one of my last questions. If a political party came to you or a major political apparatus and they said, hey, we have a whole side of the country that there is always fraught with arguments, online or otherwise, people aren't getting along. What would that strategy look like if you could do that on a wide scale? I know you talked about academic, but how would you recommend, politicians and their teams kind of navigate this?
I've been contacted 3 times now by people into politics who do door knocking, canvassing, and they want to know how they can utilize this approach. So but I go and I talk to them, and like, it just would never materialize. Like, we wanted to, because COVID, I think, was a big deterrent there. I also think it's interesting that these 3 requests only came from one party,
right?
Not others, which, who knows what that means, but that's a little scary that there might be a sizable part of our population that is actively ignoring or avoiding what we're doing, and they don't want to support us. But probably training sessions, putting together materials to teach people. So when you knock on the door to promote your candidate, it's going to probably be a really good idea to introduce yourself, build a little rapport, find out what their most important issue is, not mine or not the politician that I'm representing, but what is your most important issue? And then, like, the candidate that you plan on voting for, what is her policy, and what do you find compelling about them? And then that might be an opportunity to talk about your opponent. But here's where it gets a little different. That's where street epistemology, in my view, stops. After usually you reveal that your conversation partner, there's something lacking and their level of confidence is not justified to a certain degree, like to their own standard. And that's usually where we stop. And this might be what it takes for SE to become commonplace, is then what usually happens when people are promoting something, a worldview or a candidate, is then they use that as an opportunity to push their worldview. Like, there are people that have showed up to SE street epistemology training classes because they are against male circumcision. They want to end it. And they're tired of arguing with strangers on the street. Right. They want a more compassionate, effective approach. And they've been showing up to our classes and learning it so that they can take it back to their communities. That needs to be replicated thousands fold.
Right.
That's the way to do it.
I made faces.
Is you learning it, taking it back to your tribe, and then spreading it there. That's probably the easiest thing.
And I want to be clear, I was making faces not because I'm against or for circumcision. I just misunderstood the first part of where you're saying, that is it's encouraging that street epistemology is catching on, but still it's discouraging that it just seems to work, yet it's just not.
Yeah. Sometimes I think that it might be advantageous that it is taking so long, because if this thing blew up 4 years ago, when we were still developing it and not really focusing too much on consent and compassion and empathy and those types of things, maybe a more caustic tool would be prevalent today. I don't know. Like, maybe this ramp up and slow burn to get us to where we need to be before we start getting noticed is a good thing. I'm trying to be optimistic about it. Yes, I want everyone to learn it and do it and improve on it. But we haven't been wasting our time in the interim.
Okay. So if somebody wants to learn street epistemology, give us some good resources. Where should people go?
Go to the Street Epistemology Discord server. You can find a link to that in under resources or communities on the streetepistemology.com website. If Reddit is your thing, there's a very active Reddit, Twitter. There's a playlist that we have that you can find on the website that shows anytime anyone, like this video, if you make a video, any video that's related or adjacent to SE, we usually throw it in a playlist that you can find and you can keep current. So there are people around the world in multiple languages uploading video examples or criticism. We get critiques reviewing what we're doing and like, I hate that they're doing this. They should stop. We put their video in there because we grow from the criticisms. So that's a really good place to go to. Facebook is very active. There's some books out there. Yeah, just go to the website and support. There you go. That's one of the latest books, How to Have Impossible Conversations.
Good book. Gotta say, very good book.
Awesome.
And then I would just close by saying, really go to Anthony's YouTube channel. This is not just me plugging. It seriously is. This isn't an empty compliment, Anthony. It's my favorite YouTube channel. I think it's just a revelation. I think it's so fun to watch. And it's totally changed. I'm a person that likes to see examples. So it's not just the theoretical, you can see it in practice. And it's, and again, Anthony, is an atheist. And so a lot of them are about, but it can be extrapolated for any sort of belief.
I hope people don't, thank you for the kind words like that. I've never had somebody give me such a compliment about my channel before. I'm really honored that you said that. The videos are really good, whether they're mine or somebody else's. It's so good to see what the practitioner is explaining to the conversation partner before we start, what's being revealed through the questioning, how the person's reacting, how are they ending the talk? Oh gosh, they came back 3 weeks later for a sec. Like that's so neat to see. So the videos are an incredibly powerful way to learn the approach and get better at it. And like we need more examples too. It'd be nice to have more examples, people sharing examples, maybe where they've used this with family and friends. That would be, I get the sense that I missed a part of your question there.
No, I just wanted resources. I think we got most of the resources nailed down. And I will link all of these in the show notes of this. And so we'll be sure to mention that. Anthony, this has been incredible. You are the best. Thank you so much for your time. It's really mind expanding.
Cool, dude. Yeah. Thanks so much for having me on your show. And I hope your folks look into what we're doing and try to help us make it better. We're everyday people who have learned this method and we're sort of stumbling forward. And if you think that you can help us in some way, we need your help. Yeah.
10-4.
Thanks, dude.
Thank you so much.
All right.